I just want to introduce our guest this week. I am so excited. It's Fashion Week starting in New York. So I thought it would be great to invite a true fashion insider, somebody whose work I've been tracking for so long, somebody who I respect immensely for what he does and how he does it. Yashua, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Yashua, like Joshua.
Yashua. Exactly, that's correct. Yashua.
Yashua. And I'm excited to have
Joshua is my Starbucks name.
it's just That's right. And so I thought it would be fun for us to talk about, what it takes to be in the world of fashion today, what it takes to deal with the creative ideas and how it flows through you. And we were just talking about this sensation, like what the body feels when you are not feeling in a creative spot and when you're feeling like you're deeply in a creative spot.
Yeah. Wait, what was the question?
And, actually, you know what? It was Lisa, you were saying something about the body and creativity at one point. We were talking about that.
We were talking about having physical challenges, stress or depression, and how it fodders or fuels, one's creativity. And I'm just curious, Yashua, you said that, when you're tanking, you don't create, right? It's not your creative time. And I'm curious what you do when that happens to get back. I mean, obviously we're all different and it's a very personal question, so let me just start there. But what do you do when you're down and you got a job or
I mean, that's very powerful in the sense that I'm kind of having that experience right now, so I'm a little thrown off, so please forgive me. Because if the answer was just that simple, I'd be like, all right, back to it. But I think ultimately what for me, what needs to happen in those moments is that I really have to sort of take time to myself. I have to really kind of like put on the blinders, and really just have a greater think about like where I am in the world, how my feet are on the ground, what's around me, count my blessings in a way, if that makes sense, and kind of just get back on track, right? Like it's a sense for me, it's like metaphorically, at this, I hate to say, I feel weird about saying this, but sort of on the edge, and I have to sort of like talk myself off of it, right? There's not really any outside conversation that really ever helps that. It's really about me and just really getting in tune with my body, what I need, what's coming into me. It's, it's closing my ears, it's closing my eyes, and really kind of just having a conversation with myself, and talking to myself. I deal a lot of just having conversation with self, whatever that other thing is, whether it's ego or I don't know, people say like the devil and the angel. I don't really know what it is, but I have a lot of internal conversations with myself.
Do you feel like you've always been that way, like since you were? Yeah.
I think so. I'm watching this. It's actually really funny. I'm watching this. I started watching the show because the first 30 seconds of it, the character, it's called Physical, it comes on Apple. The character, yes. Have you seen it?
Yes, I love it. Yeah.
Well, tell me about it. I haven't seen it.
That's very similar to me. I mean, it's not as toxic as that, but there's always this sort of character that I'm in constant conversation with about sort of what I'm doing, where I'm at on the road, and especially in terms of like work,
Right.
So that's go.
Just to give you a quick understanding of the show, Lisa, it's set in 1980. It's about a California housewife who is married to a very egocentric man, and she suppresses herself in order to make him feel stronger. But her internal dialogue tells us how she really feels about her life. And then she goes on to create what would almost be like the Jane Fonda workout kind of fitness video craze.
Interesting.
No, it's really interesting. But Yeah, so that's it for me, really. Like, it's really this internal dialogue that I'm constantly having with myself, that's sort of like pushing and pulling and helping me, or also hurting me in some instances. But it's that, right? It's that to sort of get to the next and to move forward.
Did you ever play sports like growing up? Did you ever? The reason I ask you that is because of the coach's voice and
Mm,
one's head. I didn't grow up playing sports, and I always wish that I did, because it's that coach's voice that I think really drives people who were. And so for creatives like us, like on these calls, the fact that you have to psych yourself up and motivate yourself when you're feeling in your lowest spot, your own internal coach in a way. You're
that's really
totally
interesting.
pushing yourself constantly.
Well, I was a gymnast for 10 years.
Ah,
That
that explains a
explains
lot.
it all.
That says it. Right.
Oh
Well,
my
thank you for this.
goodness.
Thank you for this therapy session. This is great.
We're the two who are not therapists in all of Chip. I mean,
at all. What we understand is the creative process, and
Exactly.
I would like to talk
yeah.
about what Yashua does. I mean,
Yes,
you're a
yes,
fashion executive, I could almost say. Can you explain, like, to people, especially the kids who might be interested in design or fashion, how you got into and the, design? Do we have any photos or anything we can show of Yashua's work?
Sure, I can. I have some here.
Yeah, tell us the 411, so the kids and the young adults that are kind enough to be joining us tonight know more about you.
One second. I'm just gonna share my screen here. This is one of the very scary things that we do with Zoom.
yeah.
Look at that.
Nice.
That's amazing.
Okay, take a step back. So for me, I like to do a lot of things. And I guess the box is stylist, but like I think realistically, I consider myself, right? That inner coach calls myself an artist. And I think that, simply I'm a stylist, and that I work with clothes, and that I make pictures, and I work with, talent and celebrities, and I dress them. And I do campaigns and things like that. But I think ultimately for me, it's always about a story to tell, and sort of clothing just happens to be the paint of choice for the canvas that I'm working with, right?
Yeah.
And I think ultimately how I got into this space and into this position was just really my admiration for imagery and for storytelling. That's how I got here. Like, I loved pictures. That was the thing. And I specifically loved images and pictures that looked like me, or looked like the people that I knew, or I was connected to it in a way that was personal. Um,
Where did you
I
grow
tell
up?
this.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in New York. Yonkers, New York is where I grew up.
Oh, cool.
And it wasn't really into college. I went to Howard University, and it really wasn't into university where I really sort of understand that there's multiple languages happening, right? There's a visual language, there's the real world language, there's spoken language that's happening. And while I was consuming imagery, mostly in Vibe magazine, right? Hats off to you. That's true. That was really where I was seeing images that I loved. And while I didn't have the language, or I didn't even know that people, like, this was people's jobs, right? To make pictures, right? Like, you just kind of consume, and you don't think about the hours and the time and the money and the sweat and all of the things that go into creating one single image, right? I had no idea that this was a job, that these were people's jobs, and lucrative ones and not so lucrative ones, and self-fulfilling ones and not so self-fulfilling, but really a whole sort of world in an industry, right? Like, that I didn't learn up growing up, that, sort of art was a way to also pursue a career. And it really was just my love of looking at pictures and imagining myself in these scenarios that really got me into fashion. And not into fashion, but got me into wanting to make pictures. Now, I always loved fashion and clothing and sort of artistically expressing myself with the use of clothing. So the marriage of the two for me was, oh, I could sort of, dress and I can style, right? But that's because I had sort of a simple language. I think in hindsight, if I was to do it all over again, I'd be a photographer. But I
Never
think
too late, young man. Never too
I
late.
know that's what they say. But I mean, I think ultimately I just was inspired, and I like sought help, and I think I may have been listening to I don't quite remember, but there was someone that I was listening to, and they were speaking at the school, and the advice was, if you sort of figure out what you love, explore that in terms of what it looks like for a career. You'll never feel like you're working a day in your life, which is
Yep,
not
that's
true.
true. Oh, it's true.
Not
I think
true.
it's true.
It's not true, but it is a sort of a great compass to do something that leaves you fulfilled, you know?
Yeah.
Because artistry can be torturous. We all know the
Oh,
process.
it's such torture. It's torture.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I've been working with an editor all day, and I swear to you, I was on the edge of, 17. What can I tell you?
I mean, the edge is a real thing. But before you turn too fast, I just want to, first of all, like Yashua mentioned Vibe Magazine, which is the magazine I helped create, but I was also at one point the fashion director at a different time at Out,
Okay.
so he and I have a lot of the same references, and also when it comes to his involvement in high fashion and celebrity image making. And I want to talk about like how when you work on these covers and when you work with these artists, what is the collaborative effort like?
Let me go to one that's not that sort of weird Marilyn Minter picture.
Which is a beautiful, I mean, like
Oh, I love that. I love
one.
Marilyn
It's
Minter,
so
but I'm like,
beautiful.
maybe that's not where we speak. But
Look at this.
Gorgeous.
Romeo and Romeo.
It's poetry.
well, okay, wait. I'm gonna detour for a second, and then I'm gonna come back to that.
Okay.
And maybe this is us jumping around, but I think it's good because we're looking at the images and like having conversations, and these images always sort of bring something in to me that's very true that I like to sort of get out. Throughout my career, I've worked in many different ways. Yes, celebrity. Yes, editorial. I was at Elle for maybe 10 years, and I worked at Hearst at a very sort of like commercial magazine conglomerate, where the output was a little bit less diverse and more of a capturing of a whole, right? If that makes sense, right? Like the people that they were speaking to was not necessarily who I was, although I loved the pictures and being there. So I'm saying all that to say, when I got to Out and when I got to do my work at Out, it really woke something up inside of me. It was the first time that I'd ever been at a place that I felt like what I was doing was, or I was connected to what I was doing was actually, I could actually see how it was helping people. And this was a time where it wasn't cool to sort of say gay and to say queer, and it wasn't this sort of mainstream conversation, right? And this is not that long ago, which is a bit sad, but mainstream books were not having these conversations, and this was the first time that I can go to a place and actually sort of impact people directly, and sort of see that and learn myself and sort of put things out in the world that I knew, were these folks kind of on the margins and looking at pictures and things that were not necessarily looking like them and sort of trying to find themselves in it. We're always surrounded by images, like always. So it was really important to me to be here, and to sort of like do this work, not only for me, it felt like the first time where like I was doing something that was actually out of service to someone outside of myself. Like I felt responsible, each time that I did a story that like I have to talk to my younger brother who doesn't see himself. I have to talk to my younger self who I thought I was seeing myself, but I really wasn't seeing myself. I was seeing a version of myself, but there was a whole other version of myself that I didn't have access to in terms of like seeing it out there and it being okay, and that's sort of what happened for me at Out. And these images that I've sort of put together are really dedicate it there for the sake of this conversation. It doesn't really span, but really in my work here, it was always in tribute in memoriam to, you know, queer, marginalized folks that were that, you know, that may have needed to pick something up and see themselves.
And I can tell you from looking at this photograph, that was beautiful what you said, and I really appreciate it, very heartfelt. And when I look at these pictures, I can feel your heart in them. This photo especially, I can feel the romanticism and the care, like the blooming flowers, you know, it's the love. It's a really beautiful gesture.
Yeah.
This photo.
And this, you know, this is one of my favorite sittings that I did while I was there. And it's this love story, you know, it's not about sex, it's not about lust, it's really just about love, you know, and these people sort of happen to be who they are, you know, but like, that's not the thing. It's not a fetishization of something, which is good and also exists, you know, but like, you know, it's not this gay monolith that I think that's often portrayed, right? There's these many faces of it. And I think that, you know, I really try to sort of tap into that and cover that and tell many different stories that we live, you know?
It feels like I'm wearing the shirt that he has on in that photo. Look at, I mean, really beautiful.
You know, Yashua, your earlier conversation with us, your tenderness, I can see in your art.
Yeah.
It's very much the price we pay sometimes for our ability to narrate such deep feelings.
You know,
or we may not be able to say it, but it's the for me, a lot of the times, like I'm not the most eloquent best speaker, but like the image it's in my head and I can express sort of the emotion through the picture, right? Like I want to feel this, like this is, so I need to see that in order to sort of be connected to it, if that makes sense.
well, you know, the creative process, one of the reasons why I want to talk about the creative process a little more, because Lonnie, who is the person who created Chip, she had a keynote where she talks about how creativity and creative conversation helps change the brain waves and helps you when you're dealing with chronic issues, pain, or otherwise. And so for the creative process to make a fashion picture, it takes a village. Can you talk a little bit about you conveying your vision to the rest of the team?
Yes. Let's see, where are we going from here? Maybe I could.
Oh
wow.
Aaron Phillips.
That's fabulous, huh?
So this is actually a really good place to talk about this. So we were working on an issue. I'm not sure which issue it was. And, you know, this conversation, which is always there, is about inclusion, exclusiveness. Like we have a responsibility to paint every picture, right? Some will say we don't, but we felt the responsibility to paint every picture. Like we want to try to tell as many unique and not unique stories as we possibly can. So there was a shoot that we wanted to do with Aaron Phillips. And if you've ever sat and talked with Aaron, she's amazingly inspiring. And you know, we had a conversation, and at the time, and all the many things that she does here, the conversation we had, she wanted to be a model. So I had a conversation with her about that. There was a photographer, Hal, who took this picture, and I was like, how about we do this shoot for her as if she's going to a casting, right? Like, so the image that you're looking at is almost like a casting photo. So like if she went to a casting and she rolled up and she took her casting picture for the board to go on the board with the rest of the girls or the guys or whoever to sort of be in the show. And sort of that's how we kind of like tackled this moment. So this is Aaron's casting photo. She's blew up. She's much bigger now. She's everywhere now. She's a lot more involved for sure. She's done many casting photos, but at this particular time when we met her in her life,
in fact, runway shows, yeah.
But at this particular time when we met her, she wasn't quite there. So and telling her story, you know, that's how, you know, that's sort of where we wanted to go here, which is kind of why we're looking at this picture. But
Not
in
only
terms of,
a beautiful picture, it's provocative, which I love about fashion photography, when it can be
yeah,
provocative and beautiful at the same time.
yeah. But the process to get here, yeah,
It kind of stymies your whole thought process, doesn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's good. I think, you know, it's hard, but I think ultimately it's rewarding, right?
Right. Right.
Very
You're
much,
right.
very much. Did you, so when you realized that you could use fabric and fashion as kind of a part of your artistry, how did your family feel about it? Did they have a strong opinion about the choices that you were making after going to Howard, and what their expectations were of you?
Okay, I'm gonna be 1,000% honest with you. They still don't get it. They're like, so you just like, what is you like what, you know?
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
like, and people pay you, you know, like they still don't really get it, but they're extremely supportive. Um, it's actually, this is kind of jumping around. I was hoping to get there at the end, but we can take it here because you kind of touched on it. Um, very recently, I decided to make pictures of my dad, right? So I made pictures of my dad, which ran in Essence magazine. So he was able, we did like a full fashion story. He's a cowboy. So I shot him in like this like cowboy set around the town where we grew up on his horse. Um, but it was the first time where I think he kind of, because he was in the minutia, he was able to sort of fully understand what it is that I do. So that was like a great moment. Like he's like, oh, got it, you know?
Yeah, seeing his son call the shots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Many people have to understand, in the fashion shoot, the photographer is taking a photo and capturing the image, but it's usually directed by the stylist or the fashion director or an art director to help capture these images. And usually, Yashua said, he is all three of those: the fashion director, the stylist, and the art director. You know, directing everyone with the photographer.
yeah.
I want to
Um,
see the rest of these photos before I ask you my question. How many
sure.
more do we have, Yashua? Oh, look at this.
Beautiful.
Are a beast. Look at your work.
I mean, where he says he's not eloquent, we all beg to differ. You are completely eloquent, not just in your words, but in the images that you create.
Okay. Thank you. So this is the last image from that series. Some are a bit cut off, I guess, because of the screen, but we'll just.
Boy, you're a model's dream, I tell you.
Are these dancers? Clearly, they're.
So yeah, so these guys are all from the Alvinelli school. They're from the Alvinelli 2 school.
Mhm.
The choreographer, I cannot remember his name right now, sorry, but we in the issue in one of the issues of Out, we did sort of this Louis Vuitton special. So they're all wearing Louis Vuitton from Virgil Abloh's collection. And again, right, like there's sort of these other sort of political relationships that are in the magazine space and in the world, right? But at Out, we sort of was like, okay, how can we sort of marry this and have it feel like us and also authentic, and just kind of like capture it in a way that is still very, I don't know,
I mean, it's poetic, it's
authentic.
passion, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's showing people, like, the guys feel real, the clothes look beautiful. I mean, the funny thing is, and Lisa, please, I want to hear your question. I just want to say, looking at his work, when I was the fashion director Out, I would have conversations with the editors and the business people, and they didn't like if I put a lot of color in the magazine, which is one of the reasons why I left. And so to see the evolution of what both gayness represents, what Yasha was able to expose as beauty all around for everyone, it's just really mind blowing for me, and I applaud him. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. It's funny, even, you know, when I was sort of like pulling these images, I'm not here in my life, in this particular point of my life anymore, in terms of making these pictures, but it really sort of like drew something up in me when I was going through images from Out, and wanting to talk about my time at Out specifically, in this forum, is just like, oh, like I missed, like, you know, it was sort of like this discovery of things that I was missing, and I'm not really seeing it anymore, right? I think a lot of work that we do, right, is through our lens and through our eyes. So what happens when you sort of turn that over to other people who don't necessarily look like you, or sort of have the same values, but are sort of tasked with doing the job, like it comes off very different. It feels very different. And to me, maybe just because it's my world and it's my work, you know, these are very sort of, or what we tried to achieve was very honest photos.
Yes.
Right. So there is this fashion aspect, of course, but we were always looking for a very honest picture. And that could just be our style. So yeah, I don't know. So maybe what I said is not right, but I don't feel like I'm seeing this as I went back and I was sort of looking at it in this way.
And who was the photographer who shot this one? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was Micaiah Carter.
Right. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Lisa, you wanted to see the photos, and you're gonna.
Well, first of all, thank you. Were you out young?
That's an interesting question. Was I out young? What do you mean by that? What is out?
Were you
Like,
an out gay man as a young person, or, you know, I came out when I was 28.
Okay, sure. So I guess for the sake of the conversation, no, but I wasn't really connected to the idea that I wasn't out, if that makes sense.
It does.
I knew I wasn't out. I don't know. So I guess no. I guess the answer is no, I wasn't. And when I sort of had a formal conversation about things, I was a little bit older. I was in college.
You know, one of the things when we talk to young people is to come out at their own pace. There is no finish line. It's an ongoing process. And I always emphasize one's safety in their decision to be an out queer person, whether they are identified with gender or not, which is another choice. And also leads me to my question. There is a certain gender neutrality, even though I do not feel like that is your focus in your work. And I'm curious what you think, and this is going to sound very pedestrian, if fashion could be non-gender.
I think, can it be? Listen, I think.
I mean, how would you design? I mean,
as an example, for instance, I know that some art, like sometimes when you work with personalities, you can put them in the brand that's usually catered to like a women's customers, and maybe you can put it on a guy, or this idea that like erasing. I mean, listen, we know that like you know, fashion likes to be able to put people in boxes, even though it wants to think out of the box often. Yep. So I think that this question is a really great one, because we would want for people to wear whatever they feel most comfortable in. But I'll let you go.
Well, what I think is interesting about the history of fashion, which I don't know at all, but you know, what is traditionally men, right, or people identify as men, like wore wigs and wore heels and like wore skirts and like the colonial age, and wore like pussy blow blouses and rough, like, you know, so
and pink was the color for boys up until 1980.
Yeah, you know? So there is an interesting thing about it. I've not done the research of the history in terms of like where it went, but I almost imagine that the sort of gender roles of clothing is all marketing. I would argue that
Oh,
blindly.
interesting. Yeah.
I would argue it blindly, but I haven't done the research, but I would almost argue that that is all was just marketing. So
And and just just the first time that we were in modern day, because we know that gender bending has been something that Hollywood explored, then the Hays Code, which kind of trying to stop it. But in fashion terms, I think that like during the kind of like the hippie movement in the 60s, like fashion started to be a lot more like fluid in that moment.
mhm,
Even now, it had to do with denim. I think that guys, girls, couples, whomever they were, they could wear each other's jeans comfortably.
mhm.
It kind of like snowballed from there.
So I think there's a relationship to it, but I also think that one of the things that the relationship with like clothes and fashion is for people is there's a joy in just kind of playing with it, so like I don't know if it needs to be gender less, like it can be, and sure we can argue to get to that point, but I also think the idea of it sort of being this construct is also why people may like it, right? So I think that we experience different things with it, we have like different relationships with it. Listen, I think everything is ultimately for everyone in a sense, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll let the time tell.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And
Well,
do you ever
let
have
the time tell.
interns?
You said
Yashua, do
what?
you have interns? So many.
Okay, so I come from I come from a history of like the intern. I was probably like, in the last sense of the intern. So I don't like people working for free. That's just sort of how I am. And I think that intern has that sort of stigma of like free work, free labor. I've done it for years, and where I am now and looking back, I'm like, that was kind of not cool.
Mhm.
Whether it's a stipend or whether it's something, I think that, I think that me working for like a large company and them having years of sort of, me sort of contributing and without pay is not really cool. I get it. So I do have people that I work with. I try to get everyone paid, and I try to have everyone paid. Especially if it's project based, I try to do it that way. Assisting and being on the ground, if that's what you want to do, is also really important. I do also understand that, the times we're living in are completely different. Like you can go from the ground to the middle of a totem pole without having to do that. Like the steps are very different. For me, I'm glad I was able to sort of work my way up and sort of understand what the ground looks like before being in another place.
Yeah.
I think it's important. And yeah, I always support sort of like younger people who are coming up who want to know more and learn more to come on with me if it works out for the particular projects that I'm working on.
Who gave you your first opportunity to understand that fashion was a road for you?
Josie. I don't know if you know Josie. Josie was
We
he
went to
was the
school
creative.
together.
Oh wow, yeah, I was his intern when I first started working in fashion. I was interning at Elle, and he was very great. He worked on a lot of different projects, and he had me on those projects. And he's the one who also taught me that, yes, there is this intern work, but like, you should be compensated for the things that you are doing, you're contributing. And that's the person who sort of kicked me into the space, who got me in the door.
Do you have a favorite sound? Do you have favorite music? Because working fashion, music and fashion are very closely.
I
Um,
always go 90s R&B. I live,
Good.
that's where I live. I go
uh,
90s R&B, or I'm like late 70s.
oh my God, we could talk Rick James probably in the middle of
Yeah.
all that. And yeah. Oh,
Rick
I'm
so
just
James,
gonna
my first concert was Prince and Rick James. Prince opened for Rick James.
oh, ouch.
Yeah.
God. Lord, look at that. Beautiful.
Wow, beautiful.
Kind of flip through. And all these images are just from out.
Outside, can you talk about, there's some kids who might not know that there are queer magazines and
fashion pictures and imagery comes from, and inspiration comes from a lot of places.
Yeah.
For instance, like I like to cut pictures out of newspapers, so at the realness, and what I like here is the realness and what these people can be doing in that moment. And what you're suggesting here is that though it's a sense of fetishism, fashion borrows from fetishism all the time.
This particular story, which is also interesting, is that most of the casting that we did in Out without this with the exception of an actual celebrity was all sort of like real people, real cast, street cast. We didn't really use models. And all the individuals that are in this story happen to be all from like the community of leather. So these are actual people who actually work in this space and play in this space. And we sort of did like an Instagram casting, and we cast them to sort of help us tell the story. Again, honesty, authenticity, and sort of giving it that layer, always keeping that happening.
Well, I can see like Calvin Klein underneath of that as an ad.
And then, yeah, this picture, this is Miss Fame, who's an amazing drag queen who we shot these pictures with Paula Kadaki, which, we just kind of played with the idea of like dressing, undressing, as it pertains to sort of like drag and what that looks like. Another thing about Out when I was there is that we try to only work with, in terms of like who contributed, so photographers, writers, editors, queer, marginalized women, like everyone who was sort of on the outs, we always try, or on the margins rather, we always try to, I think we did it without a fault, try to employ them to make this other political statement, especially what was happening in this time, and queer politics and gender politics, what was going on there.
Very important now to have these photos and artists front and center. What's that saying? Not every picture tells a story, but a good photo can say 1,000 words. What is it?
We'll take that.
Okay. All right. I'm misquoting somebody brilliant.
These was interesting about these Sam Smith photos. If you can go back to the cover choice. Yes, the question, but this seems like this was like kind of a start of his new image.
Well,
It was a conversation when we made these pictures. It was definitely, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, it makes me want to definitely support Out.
Yeah.
And
what's the question? Can you see the question?
The question was, what are you working on now? That was one of the questions.
So right now, I still do editorial. I do a lot of work there right now, and this is kind of talking a little bit before I probably should be talking, but I'm working on a project that I'm really excited about, that I'm hoping to exhibit. I mentioned earlier that I made these pictures with my dad, and we kind of went around Yonkers, where I grew up, and we made these photos. These here, they exist in a very commercial space. They were for Essence magazine, and we kind of just like made these pictures in our hometown of Yonkers. But within the film, there's so many sort of beautiful art pictures, and just kind of just really amazing pictures that I'm hoping to exhibit. So I'm actually working on a proposal for that at the moment. To have those.
Cathartic for you, like to go back home, shoot your father. Did a lot of emotion come up like during that whole process for you? Full circle, like 360.
Yeah, it was a great moment. It makes it makes it all worth it. It's also, I think, for me at least, I'm always constantly, wanting to make my parents proud and have that connection to them. And so I think for my dad in particular, this was a way for him to sort of have an interior look at what I do and have that experience. And it was great. It was really great. In addition to that, I'm still doing editorial work. I've done a television show. I have, I've been working with a few celebrities on a few different things. I've worked with some fashion clients. I style runway shows, and work on campaigns, and so it's all still in the breadth of styling, but just different avenues.
Are you looking forward to any upcoming shows for any one particular show of this next season?
So speaking of gender, I love women's sort of fashion in terms of like how it shows, but I've been more into kind of like men's fashion right now. I do think there's like interesting conversations again around like expression and what that looks like, and I think that hopefully it's not a trend, but I also think that a lot of designers, even in the traditional houses, are sort of like flipping certain things and kind of exploring in a way that I find is interesting. So I've been kind of keeping an eye on that and just watching those sort of stories unfold and be told in new ways.
Yeah, I think fashion is on the runway is having a really good moment right now.
Yeah, it's having a moment.
I want to think about ending with this, which is, what do you do for yourself on a daily basis, Yashua?
Oh my God.
Like, I mean, no, I mean, like, do you drink water? Do you have a burger? Well, it can be that simple, but some people have things that maintain their well-being, and they do it every day. And I'm just curious if there was something
I'm
that
gonna stop my share. Something that makes me feel good there's actually two things. There's nothing like getting a haircut. I go to my barber and it's a complete just like reset, refresh. It helps me feel good about myself. It's like a really good
mini vacation.
It's like a good reset. But something I do nightly, which is maybe a little corny, but it really helps me, is that my partner and I, we regroup every night. We kind of like sit outside, we have a wine, and we kind of just have like a good download, and that is very self-serving. In the way that it's sort of like it makes me feel great. And when we don't have those chats, or I'm traveling, I'm left with that as well.
That's fascinating. Will you come back again sometime?
Please.
I know you're busy, but Stefan and I are building community, and it includes, the kids that are involved in their queer awareness and creativity, but it also involves artists like you. And I just want to say thank you. I just feel better for knowing you tonight.
Oh, thank you. It was great meeting you as well, and thank you for having me.
And it was great for you, for me to hear you open up and share. And I know this sometimes isn't the best platform for being vulnerable, but that's what we want this to be, both creative and vulnerable, and know it's a safe place.
Well, which I also love. I think for me, like, I try not to like get up there and just say all the right things and do the thing. Like, I really like, these are also very cathartic experiences for me too, just being asked questions, and to just try to be honest. And what ultimately happens through these conversations is that, hopefully someone on the other end is inspired, but also just I'm left with something after having sort of hearing myself and feeling my thoughts and going with what I'm doing. So it's symbiotic in both those instances. So I'm happy to be here and glad I was able to do it with you all.
Thank you so much. We don't want to take up too much more of your time. I'm sure you've helped me, and I'm sure you've helped so many people out there. And I'm glad that you and Lisa had a chance to connect. And yes, please come back.
I will, for sure. Thank you so much.